Thank you for joining us today on the Big Blue Podcast. I'm Greg Stone, Metro Campus Provost, here as always with President Leigh Goodson. Dr. Goodson, how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Good. We're here from at the Center for Creativity at Metro Campus, and our guest today is Stephen Woods, Associate Professor of Humanities at the Metro Campus. Stephen, good to see you.
It's
as
nice
always.
To be here. Thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time to come over. And I would just say, for those of you listening now, you missed the really good part, which is the last 5 minutes of these two telling stories about when they were undergrads together at OSU. I won't say who, but there was talk of pitchers of beer and being arrested by campus police, and we'll just leave it at that. We'll leave it at that.
Ethan wasn't rolling for a reason.
But Stephen, again, thanks for coming in. And of course, you and I got to really know each other well because my term as FA president was immediately following yours. So we worked together on a lot of things for 3 or 4 years there, and always appreciated hearing from you. So I'm looking forward just to asking you some other questions today. But let's start off talking about teaching philosophy. How did you develop your teaching philosophy, and what is it, and how do you share that philosophy with your students in humanities and Native American studies courses?
Well, the question of how I developed it is quite honestly trial and error. I mean, it is a constantly revised philosophy, but for the past half a dozen years or so, I've been thinking that my teaching philosophy is grounded in the concepts of freedom and equality. And so everything that I'm doing is trying to support the students' developments in those two areas. I am really inspired by a Brazilian educator named Paulo Freire, who wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And coming from a native community, that really resonated with me. And he brought to my attention the idea of education as being bifurcated into two prominent modes. One's instrumental and the other's transformative. And he made me realize how often the instrumental aspects of education, the things that get us jobs, the things that allow us to undertake the practical daily activities, these things can also be used to make us conform in ways that may not be to our choosing. And so we needed to revive the transformative elements. And that's what I think the fields that I teach in do, and I hope that students walk away with that. They seem to. But to invite someone in on the basis of freedom and equality is to invite them into a conversation, and that makes teaching a little bit different than the traditional lecture, stand up in front of the room. It involves a kind of engagement that's challenging sometimes.
We're in a time where higher ed is under a great deal of scrutiny, and part of that is squarely aimed on the liberal arts.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and you've been a really staunch supporter as a faculty member of the liberal arts. What if you were to coach me on what I would say to some legislators? Because I have to go to the Capitol every week or two. Lately it's been more than that, of course. But how would we academically or practically explain the value of liberal arts to policymakers when they're so focused on business and technical skills? Talk to us about that. And so we may have to talk through it for a minute, because, I mean, you may have your answer, and then how do we frame it for the person that can't get their head wrapped around it quite yet?
Well, working with Native students in particular, we've been an underserved community. So we know that education is going to help us find jobs. It's going to help find our students jobs. We want that. But jobs are just part of our lives. And we do that so that we can survive. But we do other things so that we can live. And that's what I think the humanities, the liberal arts, bring to our lives. It gives us examples. It gives us ideas, ways of sharing, expressing the emotions that we have about the work we do, and do it in a way that is empowering and gives us dignity and allows us to think more clearly about the more quantitative facts in front of us. So I don't think anybody goes to, these days with the trend being that we may not work in the same place for very long.
What is it, 18 different positions before they retire or
yeah.
something
The idea
like
of working
that?
for the same place is just old, and
It is.
So I don't think we can offer students the image of being able to go to someplace and stay and retire there. We need to give them ways to make those adaptations, and that means that the work we do, as gratifying as it might be, whether one's an accountant, a nurse, a historian, all the work we do can be gratifying, but it's not going to give the meaning to our lives that some of the other things can be. And so I would think the liberal arts and the humanities in particular are ways of talking about those ideas and emotions that we all share, but we don't have ways for discussing them if we don't have these courses.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. Thank you.
Stephen, you were really instrumental in developing and growing the Native American Studies program, and I'm just wondering if you might talk for a couple of minutes about, based on some of what you said earlier about freedom and equality and equity, how has that program provided opportunities for not just Native American students, but our other students as well? What's that program meant to you and to our students?
Well, it's what it's meant to me personally is that to be a part of an educational curriculum that talks about our cultures, our experiences, and students can receive the same college credit as they would if they were talking about Western culture or Asian culture. That's very, very gratifying because our cultures are as rich and varied and as useful as any of these other cultures. But as you all know, and we have a very high enrollment of Native American students, up around 10%, maybe 11%, whereas we're 1.5% of the national population. We have 39 federally recognized tribes in Oklahoma. Tulsa's the highest per capita population of natives, second only to Los Angeles. So the very fact that we have a program is not only necessary, it's right. And we've had challenges, but we've also had some great successes as well. And I think it helps integrate another student population into our educational community.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm Leigh Goodson here with my co-host Greg Stone, and you're listening to the Big Blue Podcast. Our guest today is Metro Campus Associate Professor of Humanities, Stephen Woods, and we've been talking about his teaching philosophy and experiences. So you've had the great opportunity, Stephen, of being a faculty association president.
Mm-hmm.
And I will just say, from working with 4 different faculty association presidents, that role is not for sissies, okay? It's a tremendous, just for those listening, Dr. Stone is shaking his head yes, because he's had the same experience, but it's a tremendous amount of pressure that your peers put upon you, and then that administration puts on you to bridge that communication. So, but from that perspective, what do you believe are some of the greatest needs of our faculty members?
Well, I think during the times we live in, we all know that we would all like educational funding to be greater, both providing educational resources, classroom resources, et cetera. We would all like to be paid more. We know that's the times we live in. But I think with the proliferation of knowledge systems, we're all having to become acquainted with, if not expert with, many more of those. So I think we're doing more work than we used to do. And so I think the first thing I think we need is time. That could be anything from, in a more general sense, just a kind of patience in the development to our next step, to maybe a new understanding of how many courses we teach and that sort of thing. I think so. Time's an issue, but I think speaking to other faculty members, perhaps, is that we maybe need to take courage. And we need more courage sometimes to stand up, to know that we can believe it. Some of the changes that we've had in the college structuring and processes, change is never easy. We've advocated for many years, as Greg, as you know, for faculty to take on more responsibilities related to the curriculum and to academic decisions. That means we're going to have to do more work, and we're going to have to find ways to re-envision, understand ourselves as professors at the college. So, the usual culprits: money and time, and then courage.
Great.
What's your favorite thing about teaching here?
Without a doubt, the people in all aspects. I'm humbled by the fact that we get to work with the student population we do. We get students who may not have been well served by the educational system previously. Sometimes that's a challenge, getting them to and into doing college level work. We also have students who could succeed at any college or university in the nation. That we have 17, 18-year-olds. We have 80-year-olds. I once had a class where I had a grandmother and a daughter in the same class, and that was a great experience. So the students are always amazing, and I must say I love teaching at Metro Campus in particular because the energy is just amazing. It's a thriving place. But I love my colleagues. I like working, having the conversations with people. Our staff it's amazing to see administrative assistants so dedicated to, the work they do and taking on tasks that they surely didn't expect to do. And so it's definitely the people.
So I have the opportunity to ask you the final question, Steve. And I'm particularly interested in this question because I knew you in that time frame. But if you could go back and give advice to your 18-year-old self, what would it be? Would it be to protest more? Or
Well, I wasn't going to say that, but now that you bring it up, kind of.
Yeah.
Education has changed. More of our students work more hours, maybe even try to hold down full-time jobs and try to go to school full-time. Most of our peers during the time we were undergraduates, I don't think were doing that.
No, they weren't.
And we were even encouraged not to work more than 10 hours a week if we did work, and that just wouldn't work today. But an undergraduate education is still the opportunity to discover who we are and who we want to become. And the exploratory elements of education are so invigorating, I think, that I would really encourage students to don't take education as just something you're going to do, something you've got to get through to get that degree. Those things are important. But really and truly explore, take every lesson, take every reading, take every writing assignment as an opportunity to learn about ourselves, learn about yourself when you're doing it, and get a clearer and clearer picture of who you are now and who you want to become. And if becoming who you want to be involves a little protesting, don't be afraid to do it.
I think we've seen just recently so many across the nation, not just at the national level, but across the nation, so many students finding their voice.
Yes.
I think this, some people get discouraged about the politics that are going on right now across the nation. And as we get to know our students and their generation, my money's on them.
Mine too.
Mine too.
Yep. Well, that's great. That's great advice, and thank you for joining us today.
My
You've
pleasure,
been listening to the Big Blue Podcast. We want to thank our guest, Associate Professor Stephen Woods. It's good to have you here, for spending some time with us today, and we want to thank you for listening. Remember, you can catch the Big Blue Podcast each week in the week at TCC and on the Creativity channel at YouTube. We'll hear from you next time. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.